Why Swellow there, it's Foo here, and today I'm very excited to talk about the buffs to one of my very favourite Pokemon in all time to use in battle. It's just so great and so reliable, and that is Swellow. Before we get into the video, if you do like this kind of content, please consider leaving a like because it helps promote my channel and also lets me know what you guys want to see more of, but if not, that's fine. So Swellow, introduced in Generation 3, the normal flying type of that game, and it differentiates itself from most of the other normal flying types because there are a lot of them now, with its blistering speed stat of 125, which is just so fast and so great. But that's very important because this Pokemon, in terms of stats, really doesn't have much else going for it. It's got a usable 85 attack stat, which is still pretty mediocre, and then very low bulk, really low bulk. It can be taken out by non-super effective hits. It's just very frail, which you need to watch out for. But that speed stat is great. It makes up for everything because it means hopefully you'll outspeed and take out the opponent if possible before they're even able to hit you. In terms of abilities, it does only have 2, but they're both pretty great and pretty useful. So you've got Guts, which means that when Swellow is afflicted by a status, its attack stat is boosted, which is really nice. It's really great, especially because it's a normal type, which means that it gets stab on Facade, and Facade, again, that couples with Guts because when you're afflicted with the status, Facade's damage is doubled. So Facade and Guts is a great pair. This Pokemon does a lot of damage with that. Frailer Pokemon just drop to it, and that's great when it's got such a fast speed, so it means that it's a really good revenge killer, for example, and can clean up teams pretty efficiently. So their ability is Scrappy, which means that ghost types aren't immune to its stab normal type moves, which is really helpful too, especially because Swellow doesn't have great coverage moves, so that's an issue for Swellow, really is an issue. It can't hit rock and steel types at all, but at least it can hit ghost types because it has that Scrappy ability, which is really cool. So prior to Generation 7, the most common set that you'd probably see would be this Guts set, just because it does increase its attack to a really nice level, and Facade is great at cleaning up teams. But that all changes with the buffs that we see in Generation 7. So let's get into it. The first buff is going to be a stat buff, and it's definitely the most transformative buff for Swellow because it takes it from being primarily a physical attacker and completely swapping that to it being a special attacker. So the stat buff takes its special attack from 50 to 75. It's plus 25 base points in special attack, which is huge. 50 to 75 is like a massive increase. But at the same time, 75 is still relatively low. So how does this make Swellow a really good special attacker, you may ask? Well, that's because it gets access to Boom Burst, a very powerful normal type move, base 140 power. It gets Stab on top of that, so it's base 210 power, which is more powerful than most Z moves. That's crazy. So even off a base 75 special attack stat, that's going to be doing quite a lot of damage. You can pair it with the Scrappy ability, so even ghost types aren't immune. And you can also give Swellow the choice specs because it really doesn't need choice scarf. It's fast enough. It'll be outspeeding everything anyway. So you can just give it the choice specs. You're going to be spamming that Boom Burst because nothing can take it other than very bulky rock and steel types. But Boom Burst is just so easy to spam. I've already said that Swellow doesn't have great coverage moves, but on the special side, at least it does have Heat Wave, which means that it can hit those steel types, and that makes for a very potent set. Just with Boom Burst and Heat Wave, this Pokemon can be a real menace to so many teams. It's great at revenging Pokemon. It's great at cleaning up. You just have to spam that Boom Burst, and it's so effective. Other moves on the set you can run. U-turn's pretty helpful, but that brings us to the second buff for Swellow, and that is going to be a new move it learns in Hurricane. So prior to Generation 7, the most powerful flying type special move that Swellow could learn was Air Slash. Bearing in mind that Air Slash has a similar base power to a resisted Boom Burst, it's pretty redundant really to run it on any set. but now you can run Hurricane, which means that bulky fighting types or grass types that you might be concerned about that might not get OHKO'd by a Boom Burst have a chance to be OHKO'd by Hurricane instead, which is pretty cool. And because Swellow's coverage moves are pretty lacking anyway, it's just nice to have another offensive option for this Pokemon. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to run Hurricane and have that choice if you do want it. So both of those add up to a very potent special attacking Swellow that's definitely the most seen now, and probably not so overlooked as some of the other Pokemon that I've talked about. But I'll go into detail over some more overlooked aspects of this newly buffed Swellow. One more overlooked buff for Swellow this generation is actually the reduction in burn damage. So in Generation 6, at the end of each turn, if you were burned, you would take 12% damage. But in Generation 7, this has been reduced to 6%, saving you 6% of your health each turn. This is generally overlooked because the special set is so much more preferred over the physical one these days, but it's important to note because the physical set is definitely much more valuable because of this change, considering that Swellow is weak to rocks, so potentially takes 25% of its health on switching, and it goes for moves like Brave Bird. Strong Brave Birds with a low base HP means you take a ton of recoil, so saving 6% of your health each turn is really huge for this Pokemon, and in general all Pokemon that use the Flame Orb have gained this buff this generation, so it's one not to overlook. And we're going to look at the Z moves next to see how this has affected this Pokemon. So in terms of offensive Z moves, Swellow doesn't benefit very much. In terms of the physical sets, they need the Flame Orb boost for Guts, and with Facade, you've actually got a really strong physical move to use there anyway. So generally, you don't want to be running an offensive Z move and taking away that Flame Orb from Swellow. So that's a reason not to use an offensive Z move on the physical set. On the special set, you don't want to use Normalium Z because a Breakneck Blitz based off Boom Burst, which is a lot of B's to say, is actually weaker than a Choice Specs Boom Burst. So you actually lose power from running that, and obviously you only get to use the Breakneck Blitz once, and it's still not as powerful as a Specs Boom Burst. So basically, rule that one out. You could run a Flyinium Z Hurricane set, which is pretty nice because it mitigates Hurricane's poor accuracy and gives you a powerful flying type move to use, and you can switch up moves. But I'd say a more valuable Z move to potentially consider would be Firium Z turning Heat Wave into an Inferno Overdrive, meaning that Swellow can act as a lure for Steel types. So if you have issues with Steel types on your team, you could give Swellow the Firium Z, invite in the Steel types by threatening for going for Boom Burst, when actually you're going to go for an Inferno Overdrive, do massive damage to their Steel type, and it means that you can also switch up moves, so you can still use your Boom Burst, and maybe you can actually use more utility moves on this set because you'll have more of a chance to use them. So having Defog on a set like this might be useful because Swellow is so fast, it means that you probably will be able to get a Defog off if you really need it and if it's very valuable to you. So that's just another set to consider, something like Boom Burst, Heat Wave, U-Turn, Defog with a Firium Z. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of status moves, there are 3 directions you can take with Swellow. The first one is speed boosting, which I feel is pretty unnecessary, but you could run something like Z Rain Dance, which boosts its speed and also makes its Hurricanes more accurate, which is nice. But Boom Burst is still more powerful than Hurricane and doesn't even need Rain set up. So I'd say this one is pretty redundant because the speed boost isn't worth it either. You could also try to boost its critical hit rate with Z Tailwind. Tailwind will again boost its speed, which is kind of not necessary, but having boosted critical hit rate could be useful. The issue is you'll only be critical hitting 50% of the time and getting a 50% damage boost, whereas if you hold Choice Specs, you always get a 50% damage boost, or if you get a Flame Orb boost, you always get a 50% damage boost on the physical sets. So really, again, this set is probably pretty redundant on Swellow. The status moves that I think have most value for Swellow boost its attack. So you've got Z Work Up, which boosts its attack and special attack, and then the Z move means that it boosts its attack again, so you get +2 attack +1 special attack. This is pretty neat if you want to run a mixed Swellow with something like Brave Bird, Boom Burst and Heat Wave, so that you can have really powerful moves across the board, and whatever your opponent throws at you, you've got pretty interesting moves to cover for that. The issue with this one is that Swellow is so frail, it can get one-hit KO'd by non-super effective moves, so having a setup turn to do the Z workup, it's going to be hard to do, but it's still an interesting one to try if you want to have a mixed Swellow. I think the Z move that holds most value for Swellow and gives it as something different to do that could actually do some work is probably Z mirror move. What this does is it gives Swellow +2 attack and potentially bounces back the last move that the opponent used as a Z move. So for example, if your opponent has just knocked out one of your Pokemon with Outrage, you can send in Swellow, go for Z mirror move, get +2 attack, and fire a devastating Drake back at them, which means that they'll probably get taken out because you're +2 attack going for a Z move, and it means that you don't have to worry about that setup turn, and then you are poised to sweep through the rest of their team with things like Brave Bird or Quick Attack or whatever. You've got the +2 attack at that stage, so it'll put you in a decent position. But overall, I think those are much more gimmicky than the Flame Orb set or the Choice Spec set if you want to use Swellow. The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is something that I have to talk about at every opportunity because I love it so much, and that is Echoed Voice, my favorite gimmick in the entire game. It's just so fun to use and so cool, and no one else uses it, and I now think that Swellow is the best Echoed Voice user in the game. It's so good and it's just so nice. If you want to use this gimmick, you have to use Swellow. So Echoed Voice is a relatively weak normal type move. It starts at 40 base power, but if you use it on consecutive turns, it boosts the power by 40 base power each turn to a maximum of 200 base power, which is equivalent to very powerful Z moves. So you could be firing off a Z move every turn if you get to the 5th turn of Echoed Voice. Now what's cool about this is that you can have an entire team base of Echoed Voice, because as long as you use Echoed Voice in a turn, the chain continues, even if your Pokemon faints. So that means that the most important thing for Echoed Voice teams is speed, because you have to be faster than your opponent to use Echoed Voice before they knock you out. And guess what? Swellow is super fast. It can hold the Choice Spec, so it's actually really powerful. And it has Scrappy, so nothing is immune to its Echoed Voice, meaning that in my eyes, it is the most important member of any Echoed Voice team, and just a very good Echoed Voice user in general. I love this Pokemon for this. It's great at starting chains, it's great at coming in once a chain is set up and just sweeping through your opponent's team because nothing is immune to it, and it's just so good. It's more potent than some other Pokemon. People think that Mega Gardevoir is a good Echoed Voice user. In my opinion, it's a bit too slow, because it can't hold the Choice Scarf, but it is powerful. But Swellow is just faster and better in my opinion. Because it is faster, it means that it can support the rest of your Echoed Voice team, because it will always get that Echoed Voice off. I love this Pokemon. That's why it's one of my favorite Pokemon to use, because it's got all of these interesting things and effective sets that go before it where it doesn't need any support, but then it's got this Echoed Voice set which is so great and my favorite gimmick, and that's why I love it. If you want to find out more about using this Echoed Voice team gimmick, then I'll leave a link to a previous video that I've done in the description, and also as an end screen clickable link thing on the video itself. So those are all the buffs that I want to talk about today. I hope I've inspired you to use Swellow, and I hope I've convinced you why it's one of my favorite Pokemon of all time to use. Let me know how you like to use Swellow in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, because it really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more, then consider subscribing and probably dinging the bell as well, because I'm not very regular with uploads, so if you don't want to miss one, then definitely ding the bell. It's very helpful. Follow me on Twitter too while you're at it, because we discuss Pokemon stuff there and it's all a lot of fun. But that's going to be all for today. I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time.